Hello, my dear friends. This is Dr. Jonathan Hale. After more than 30 years researching human intimacy, aging, and emotional well-being, I've come to realize something we rarely talk about, especially when it comes to older adults. We talk a lot about heart health, arthritis, or memory loss. But there's another kind of pain that grows quietly with age. One that isn't about the joints or the lungs, but about the soul. Today, I want to speak not just as a researcher but as someone who has sat across from hundreds of men and women in their 60s, 70s, and beyond. People who whispered their truth in my office, with tears in their eyes. I didn't expect to feel this, alone. And sometimes, that loneliness takes a digital form. Today, we explore a growing but hidden concern, virtual sex addiction in older adults and the emotional vacuum it often tries to fill. Brain Section 1, When Loneliness Becomes the Background Noise of Aging. Let's begin with a truth that few are willing to say out loud. Loneliness in older age is not an exception, it's increasingly the rule. You see, as we grow older, many of the constants in our lives begin to shift or disappear. A spouse passes away. Children move away. Our careers, which once gave us identity and purpose, fade into the past. And suddenly, the home that used to be filled with voices, laughter, and even the occasional argument, becomes eerily quiet. Days blend into nights, and you start counting how many conversations you had in a week, maybe one, maybe none. In this quiet, something else happens. The body doesn't forget touch. The heart doesn't forget what it feels like to be desired, to be close to someone not just physically, but emotionally. Many of my patients, men in their 60s and 70s, would say to me, "I'm not trying to chase youth. I just miss being seen. I miss being wanted." And that, my friends, is where virtual intimacy creeps in. Laptop computer, the rise of digital companionship. What starts as harmless curiosity often turns into habit. A man, recently widowed, scrolling the internet late at night, stumbles across a chat room. Or a woman who hasn't felt emotionally close to anyone in years ends up watching adult videos not just for sexual reasons but for emotional comfort. You see, virtual sex isn't always about sex. It's about connection, manufactured, instant, and completely under your control. Unlike real relationships, virtual ones don't demand vulnerability. They don't talk back. They don't age. They simply perform, or respond, when you press play or send. And for someone who feels invisible in real life, that can be incredibly seductive. But here's the problem. It's a false intimacy that never truly satisfies. It's like drinking salt water when you're thirsty. The more you consume, the more dehydrated you become. Open book, A Composite Story, Robert's Late Night Habit. Let me tell you a story not of one real person, but a composite drawn from years of real stories. We'll call him Robert. Robert is 68. His wife of 42 years passed away 3 years ago. Since then, his days feel long and colorless. His 2 kids live in different states, and though they call occasionally, it's not the same. One night, unable to sleep, he clicks on a video link in an email. It opens to an adult site. Nothing aggressive. Just soft imagery, a voice whispering something kind, something sensual. He watches. He feels a little ashamed, but also oddly comforted. The next night, he comes back. Then again. A week later, he signs up for a private chat. And before long, Robert finds himself spending 2 or 3 hours every night in a digital world that feels safer, more affirming, and completely unreal. Counterclockwise arrows button, the dangerous cycle of virtual sexual comfort. What Robert experiences is more common than you might think. The American Psychological Association notes that compulsive sexual behavior can affect older adults just as much as younger ones, but we rarely study it in aging populations. Why? Because people assume sexuality fades with age. But it doesn't, it evolves. Here's how the cycle works. Emotional loneliness leads to seeking comfort online. Online content provides instant dopamine and distraction. After the high, comes the emotional crash, shame, sadness, emptiness. That crash leads to more seeking, more clicks, more digital escape. It's not so different from emotional eating or substance use, only this one lives inside your browser, in secret. Broken heart, the hidden cost, emotional and social withdrawal. Perhaps the saddest part isn't the content itself. It's what it replaces. When someone becomes dependent on virtual sexual experiences, they often withdraw even further from real human contact. Robert, for example, stopped going to his community center. He no longer returned his neighbors' calls. He turned down an invitation to a book club because he didn't feel like making new friends. But underneath, what he really feared was being seen as broken, lonely, or perverse. And that, my friends, is the deepest wound. Not the act itself but the isolation that surrounds it. Older adult light skin tone. Why this matters for older adults specifically. Younger people, especially those who grow up with the internet, have more cultural permission to talk about online behaviors, sex, and addiction. But for older adults, there's a wall of silence. A deep shame. A fear of being judged. Men tell me, I'm supposed to be over this stuff by now. Women say, I don't even know who to talk to, no one would understand. But here's what I want every viewer to know. Virtual sex addiction in older age isn't a moral failure. It's a symptom of unmet emotional needs, of physical isolation, of a world that has stopped touching you with kindness. And like any symptom, it deserves care, not condemnation. Final thoughts, a hand reaching through the screen. As we close part 1 of this conversation, I want you to know this. If any part of this story feels familiar, if you or someone you love has slipped into a world of late-night clicks and secret screens, it's not too late. This is not about shame. This is about understanding. About asking, what is your heart truly hungry for? And if the answer is closeness, tenderness, meaning, then know this. There are ways to find it again. In real life. With real people. But first, we have to talk about it. And that's what we'll do in part 2. Brain. In the next video, we'll explore how this addiction changes the brain and body, the emotional consequences, and what medical research says about sexual compulsion in later life. If this spoke to you, don't forget to like, share, or comment below. Your voice might help someone else feel a little less alone today. Bell. Subscribe to @DOCTORSHARES Stethoscope for honest, human conversations about aging, intimacy, and everything in between. Virtual sex addiction in older adults, Part 2, how it quietly destroys the mind, the body, and the spirit. Hello again, dear friends. This is Dr. Jonathan Hale, and thank you for returning to this important and deeply personal conversation. If you're here, it means Part 1 resonated with you. Maybe you saw yourself in Robert's story. Maybe you recognized someone you love. In our last episode, we explored how loneliness in later life, a quiet, often invisible kind, can lead older adults toward virtual sexual behaviors that begin as emotional comfort but can spiral into addiction. Today, I want to take you deeper. This isn't about blame or guilt. It's about understanding the real consequences, biological, emotional, and relational, of this silent struggle. And trust me, as someone who has studied human connection for over 3 decades, I say this with no judgment, only compassion and truth. Brain. Section 1, what virtual sex does to the aging brain. Let's begin with what happens in the brain. When someone watches pornography, engages in erotic chat rooms, or even becomes hooked on sexual fantasy games online, the brain rewards that behavior with a release of dopamine, a powerful neurotransmitter associated with pleasure, reward, and motivation. This dopamine hit creates a neurological loop. You feel lonely, rightward arrow, you seek comfort online. You get a dopamine spike, rightward arrow, your brain says, this feels good. Do it again. You return the next night, and the next, until it becomes a habit, then a compulsion. Here's the part most people don't realize. The aging brain is more vulnerable to this type of loop. As we age, our natural dopamine levels decline. That's why older adults often experience reduced motivation or energy. So when an artificial source of dopamine appears like online sexual content, it creates a stronger than normal reaction. The brain becomes extra sensitive, even dependent. This is not weakness. This is biology. And over time, just like with any addiction, the brain becomes less responsive to regular stimuli, Activities that once brought joy, gardening, reading, walking with a friend, start to feel dull. The addicted brain says, only this one thing makes me feel alive. But of course, it's a lie. Because the more you consume, the emptier you feel. Broken Heart Section 2, The Emotional Toll, a slow disintegration of the self. Many older adults who fall into virtual sex addiction don't even realize they're struggling with it. Why? Because it's not just about sex, it's about emotional numbing. I've seen it too often. A 70-year-old widower who once loved painting no longer touches a brush. A retired teacher who used to volunteer now cancels every appointment. A former nurse who once loved deep conversations now lives through a screen. This addiction becomes a form of emotional anesthesia. It dulls pain, but it also dulls joy. It reduces human experience into a cycle of temporary highs and long-lasting lows. Let me share something deeply personal from my practice without revealing identities, of course. A man, let's call him Harold, age 72, told me, "I feel like a ghost of myself. I don't even know why I'm doing this anymore. I just do it. Every night. Then I cry. Then I do it again." That is not about lust. That is about emotional despair. And unfortunately, most older adults do not seek help. They believe this behavior is shameful, or worse, that it's pathetic at their age. They isolate themselves further, wearing a mask of normalcy in public, while falling apart in private. But here's what I tell them. You are not broken. Your heart is asking for help the only way it knows how. DNA Section 3, Physical Side Effects, the body keeps the score. We often think of sex addiction as only affecting the mind. But the truth is it wears down the body too. Let's look at what extended, compulsive virtual sexual activity can do to the physical health of older adults. ZZZ1. Disrupted sleep patterns. Nighttime is the most common period for online sexual behavior, especially for older adults living alone. This results in irregular sleep, insomnia, and poor sleep quality. Over time, this leads to fatigue, brain fog, weakened immune function, increased risk of depression. Stethoscope 2. Cardiovascular strain. Though this may sound surprising, frequent arousal, especially when paired with guilt and adrenaline, can place strain on the heart. For older adults with hypertension or heart disease, the combination of arousal, shame, and secrecy creates dangerous stress spikes. Man-standing 3. Musculoskeletal pain. Hours of sedentary posture hunched over a screen can worsen back pain, joint stiffness, and posture issues, which are already common in older age. Broken Heart 4. Sexual dysfunction. Ironically, compulsive use of virtual sexual content can lead to erectile dysfunction, decreased libido for real-life intimacy, loss of satisfaction during actual physical connection. Why? Because the brain becomes wired to respond to fantasy, not reality. This disconnect creates shame and frustration during real encounters, further reinforcing isolation. Busts in Silhouette Section 4, Relationship fallout, a barrier between you and the world. The most devastating impact of this addiction may not be physical or neurological but relational. Older adults who were once warm, sociable, or affectionate often become withdrawn and irritable. Spouses, if still present, feel neglected or confused. Friends may feel pushed away. Adult children may notice a vague change but not know why. It creates a wall between the person and everyone who loves them. In couples, it can feel like emotional infidelity. Even if there is no affair, the energy and emotional investment that once belonged to the partner now goes into a virtual world. I once worked with a woman, Mary, 67, who said through tears, "He doesn't cheat. But he disappears every night. And I'm here, next to him, invisible." This digital obsession becomes a barrier to emotional repair in relationships. Why? Because the addicted partner may feel too ashamed to talk, and the hurt partner may feel too wounded to ask. And so the silence grows. Brain Section 5, Why the shame is so heavy for older adults. Younger people today live in a culture where open conversations about sex, addiction, and mental health are more normalized. They can joke about it, post memes, seek therapy without stigma. But for older adults, sex has always been private. Taboos are deeply rooted. The idea of needing help for sexual behavior is often seen as humiliating or morally wrong. For many, especially those from conservative or religious backgrounds, the guilt is unbearable. And yet, silence is the greatest enemy. Because in silence, shame festers. And in shame, addiction grows stronger. I always tell my clients this. The brain responds to kindness far better than it does to punishment. If we want to break this cycle, we must begin with compassion, not criticism. Direct hit final reflections. You are more than this addiction. Let me leave you with something I wish every older adult struggling with virtual sex addiction could hear. You are not disgusting. You are not weak. You are not alone. You are a human being whose need for connection, touch, and love never retired. And just like any other health issue, this too can be understood, addressed, and healed. Addiction thrives in darkness. But healing begins the moment you name it, without shame. In part 3, we will talk about how to break free, the emotional steps, the practical tools, and the hopeful stories of older adults who found their way back to real, fulfilling intimacy. Television Next Episode Preview. From virtual craving to real connection, how older adults can heal from sex addiction. We'll explore simple but powerful steps for healing, ways to reconnect emotionally with yourself and others, and how love at any age can still bloom. Speech balloon. If this video touched you in any way, please leave a comment. Share your thoughts, even anonymously. You never know who might read it and feel less alone. Bell. Subscribe to @DOCTORSHARES Stethoscope for more human, honest conversations about aging, healing, and hope. Until next time, stay kind to your heart. It's never too old to feel whole again. Movie camera. Virtual sex addiction in older adults, Part 3, From Craving to Connection, The Path to Healing. Hello again, my dear friends. This is Dr. Jonathan Hale, and I'm truly honored to have you with me for this final part in our important series on virtual sex addiction in older adults. If you've made it this far, I want to pause and say, thank you. Thank you for your courage, your curiosity, and your willingness to confront a subject that, for many, stays buried in silence. In Part 1, we uncovered the silent loneliness that often seeds this addiction. In Part 2, we explored its devastating impact on the mind, the body, and the soul. But today, in Part 3, we turn towards something powerful. Hope, healing, and reconnection. Because I promise you, no matter how far you've gone down the rabbit hole, there is always a path home. Compass. Section 1, the first step to healing, recognize without shame. Let's start with something I say in every support group I run. Healing begins when shame ends. If you're struggling with compulsive virtual sexual behavior, or you suspect someone you care about is, the first act of healing is recognition without self-judgment. You don't need to label yourself as broken. You don't need to carry the weight of moral failure. You simply need to acknowledge. This no longer feels like a choice. And I want to take back control. That's it. That one sentence is where your power returns. And listen, you are not alone. In recent years, therapists and researchers have reported a significant rise in virtual sex dependency among adults over 60. The digital world didn't skip your generation. It just came in quietly, without the tools or conversations to manage it. Hammer and wrench. Section 2, Practical Strategies, How to Gently Break the Cycle. Here's where we move from awareness into action. You don't need a dramatic detox or military-style discipline. What you need is a gentle, structured way to reclaim your life. Let me share a 5-step recovery framework we've developed over years of clinical research. White heavy check mark. Step 1, track without judgment. Keep a private log of when urges appear. Notice patterns. Is it at night? When you're lonely? After watching the news? After a phone call from your kids? You're not tracking to punish yourself. You're tracking to understand yourself. White heavy check mark. Step 2, identify your emotional triggers. Behind every craving is an unmet need. Is it comfort? Physical touch? Stress relief? Boredom? Once you name the emotional root, you can meet the need differently. One man I worked with, Thomas, realized he turned to online chat rooms every time he felt forgotten by his adult children. We worked on building other rituals of connection, calling an old friend, joining a local men's circle. The urges began to fade. White heavy check mark. Step 3, replace, not just resist. Willpower is limited. What works better is replacement. When you feel the urge rising, instead of saying don't do it, try a warm bath and music. A 10-minute walk around the block. Writing a short memory from your childhood. Listening to a podcast about aging gracefully. Every time you make a new choice, you rewire the brain toward resilience. White heavy check mark. Step 4, create a digital boundary. Don't rely on sheer willpower in front of the screen at midnight. Try these. Turn off Wi-Fi at night. Use website blockers, like Cold Turkey or Freedom. Move your devices out of the bedroom. Switch to reading books in bed instead of scrolling. Older adults are fully capable of learning new tech tools, you just need the right reason. White heavy check mark. Step 5, talk to one safe person. This might be the hardest step of all. But if you can find just one non-judgmental listener, a therapist, a pastor, a sibling, even an online support group, you will begin to dissolve the secrecy that feeds the addiction. As I often say, what you hide holds power over you. What you speak begins to release. Revolving Hearts. Section 3, reconnecting with real intimacy. Now let's talk about what comes after the addiction. This is the part that most people forget. You're not just removing something harmful, you're restoring something beautiful. Older adults often assume intimacy is something of the past. But in my work, I've seen people in their 60s, 70s, even 80s rediscover profound connection, emotional, physical, and spiritual. Here are a few simple steps toward real intimacy. 1. Make eye contact with someone each day. Even a short chat with a neighbor or cashier builds a bridge back to humanity. Handshake. 2. Offer gentle physical affection. Hold a friend's hand. Hug your grandchild. Pat a neighbor's back. Touch heals not just the body but the soul. Speaking head. 3. Share something vulnerable. When someone asks how are you, try answering honestly. I've been lonely lately is not weakness. It's a doorway. Red heart. 4. Reawaken sensuality, not just sexuality. Light a candle. Savor your favorite dessert. Dance to an old love song. Let your senses remind you that you're alive and worthy of pleasure in healthy ways. Dove. Section 4, the stories that inspire me. I want to close this section with stories of hope because they're real. Open book. Nancy, 68. After 5 years of nightly pornography use following her husband's death, she joined a grief and writing group. Within 3 months, she reported a 70% drop in cravings. I finally had a place to put my feelings, she told me. Open book. George, 75. George was addicted to erotic chat sites for over a decade. He felt ashamed, especially as a former deacon. But with therapy and spiritual counseling, he eventually found love again with a woman who accepted all of him. They married last year. Open book. Helen and Mark, 63 and 65. After confronting Mark's online addiction together, they rebuilt their marriage with new rituals, nightly foot massages, morning walks, and no-screen Sundays. They said their intimacy is better now than it was in their 40s. Brain. Section 5, a final message from my heart. To anyone watching this, whether you're in the thick of the struggle, or just waking up to the truth, I want you to hear this clearly. You are not too old to change. You are not too damaged to be loved. You are not alone in this journey. Virtual sex addiction does not define you. It is a symptom, not your identity. It's a call for connection that got misdirected. But it can be redirected gently, honestly, and with dignity. You have chapters left to write. Not about shame but about growth, intimacy, and rediscovered joy. Television. Closing. An invitation to the community. If this series has meant something to you, I invite you to comment below anonymously if you wish. Subscribe to this channel, at DOCTORSHARES Stethoscope. Share this with someone who may be silently suffering. Together, we're building a space where aging is not just about survival but about coming home to yourself. Until we meet again. This is Dr. Hale, reminding you. Your heart was made for connection. And it's never too late to feel fully alive again.